Selma brenner for å finne måter å styrke individuell og kollektiv velvære på, og gjøre kunnskapen kjent, altså spre kunnskapen, sånn at flest mulig kan få høre om dette. Hun har forsket på mange forskjellige områder, blant annet helsepsykologi, medfølelse, mindfulness og yoga. Nå studerer hun ved UCLA, og hun jobber innen integrativ nevrobiologi med fokus på compassion, sammen med Dr. Dan Siegel. På fritiden så er Selma aktiv. Hun liker blant annet å danse flamenco, og så liker hun å tilbringe tid ute i naturen, og hun liker å gå turer og klatre. Og i dag så skal Selma prate til oss om dette med Google og mindfulness. Selma har nemlig deltatt i et forskningsprosjekt der leder for Google ble undervist i mindfulness. Hva har de lært, medarbeiderne og lederne? Og hva kan andre organisasjoner lære om måten dette prosjektet ble gjennomført på? Dette spørsmålet, blant andre spørsmål, stiller Selma oss. Og derfra sier jeg ordet til Selma. Takk.
I'm going to take it in English as well. How does your work contribute to a greater good? What could you do to raise awareness in you and your workmates of the higher purpose of your work? We now know from research that the intention for why we're doing a certain task, may it be attending a meeting, doing a meditation, or being at this conference and listening to this talk right now, has a huge impact on the outcome. Our intention puts us in touch with why we are paying attention, and thus it sets a purpose. So I would like you all to reflect for a moment on your intentions for being here today, at this conference, and at my talk right now. And then I dare to encourage you, in addition to this, to ponder on these questions and use those as a guidance, as I'll take you through the science and effects of mindfulness and compassion, from when there was only a few studies published in the 90s, and mindfulness was considered alternative and hippie, to today being a highly popular research topic with thousands of studies published, being on the front of Times magazine, being implemented in corporate boardrooms and in many big companies, including some of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley and around the globe. We are at a point in time where our actions matters tremendously. What we do the next 10 years predicts the next 1,000 years when it comes to climate changes. And with climate changes comes an increased necessity for taking care of one another. Not only within our own countries, but across borders as well. Mindfulness, compassion, and sustainability was the focus of the intervention I was a part of doing my studies at UC Berkeley, teaching the leaders at Google in a mindfulness-based leadership program, specifically targeted towards fostering leadership traits aligned with principles of sustainability. It's also the focus of my current work, collaborating with some of the top tech companies, including Facebook, Apple, and Amazon. And it's why I'm here today, because I and others believe that practices of mindfulness and compassion has something positive to contribute in the situation that we're all facing today. By the end of this talk, we will hopefully have an idea for why it is that mindfulness is good for you, the people around you, your organization, and even the climate. So what is mindfulness? As it has been shared so many times during those 2 days, there's no one definite definition on it, but that there is a broad consensus, and the one that's often used in the literature is that mindfulness is the awareness that arises when intentionally paying attention to the present moment in an open, kind, and non-judgmental way. It's relevant to the work life because it teaches us to become more focused and more aware. Focused on the tasks that we do and the people that we are with. And it increases our awareness, including our awareness of our own unconscious bias, so that we can regulate avoidantly. By teaching us to step back and notice our inner and outer stimuli without being them necessarily, mindfulness creates a pause between a stimulus and a response. And in this pause, you get a choice. You get a choice on how you would like to react, rather than reacting instantly on ingrained habits that may not serve you, others, or the situation. So you can say that mindfulness gives you a choice. As Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. My dear colleague Shauna Shapiro often say that you can say that mindfulness teaches us to see clearly so that we can respond reflectively and effectively. The science behind mindfulness has expanded exponentially in the past few decades, as can be seen in the graph above. In a review I recently published, I read through more than 2,000 studies on mindfulness, and I found randomized controlled trials proving that mindfulness broadly benefits human functioning by leading to better handling of and recovery from stress. We become better at bouncing back from negative life experiences, so we become more resilient. Increasing well-being and positive emotional experience. Strengthening our relationships. Relationships where they practice mindfulness report being happier, higher satisfaction in their relationships. Research has even found that it slows the cellular aging process. It improves our immune response, and it increases our higher cognitive abilities. A research study found that after 8 weeks of practicing mindfulness practice, our prefrontal cortex thickens, this area. This is the area involved in abilities such as reasoning, planning, judgment, tuning into other people's emotions and social situations, even to creativity and innovation. It integrates neural pathways of differentiated parts. The area in the brain that connects our left and our right hemispheres grows after a regular mindfulness practice. What many organizations are very interested in is mindfulness's effect on focus and attention. And this is relevant because the famous Harvard research study have found, as it was mentioned yesterday, that our mind wanders on average 47% of the time. Now this means that you've only heard half of what I've been saying so far. Yep, and I think it's true. Imagine how much extra time you would have though if you were able to spend this on something you actually wanted. It's nearly half of our lives that we're not paying attention and being present in what we're currently doing. What makes things even worse is that the neuroscientist Dr. Joe Dispenza found that 95% of the thoughts you're thinking today are the same thoughts as you were thinking yesterday. And finally, 85% of what we worry about never happens. As Michel Montaigne says, my life has been filled with misfortune, most of which never happened. So adding up the math, half of the time you're not paying attention to what you're currently doing. 95% of this time, you're thinking the same thoughts as you already did yesterday. And 85% of this time, you're worrying about things that will never happen. So no wonder that people report being less happy when they're not paying attention. And that neuroscientist Dr. Richard Davidson says, A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So not only do we know that you become more happy when you're paying attention and you're present, but interestingly enough is that the people around you report greater well-being as well. When mindfulness is woven into the decision-making process in an organization and it becomes part of the culture, employees' needs are more often seen and met, which drives up commitment, engagement, and productivity. The Aetna Healthcare Company reported 62 minutes of extra productivity time per person per week related to providing institutional opportunities for mindfulness practices on a larger scale. In studies of leaders, mindfulness leads to being more well-liked, being a better negotiator and problem solver, even to greater productivity and success. UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center have brought some suggestions for why it is that they believe that mindfulness at work provides these benefits as it does. And they argue that it's first of all because mindfulness has shown to reduce workaholism. By increasing our awareness, we become more aware of the core unpleasantness of overwork, and thus diversifies how we think about our own effectiveness and worth in the world. It has shown to reduce perfectionism and excessive self-criticism. It has even been tied to increased communication qualities. We become better at hearing what others are trying to say because we get less fixated on our own personal interpretations and carefully planned rhetoric, and more invested in discovering win-win solutions to problems. And then finally, what I think is particularly important and interesting is that it has shown to increase efforts to address causes of injustice rather than getting revenge. Sorry about that sound. However, what I and other people find particularly interesting is that mindfulness and explicit instructions in compassion-building practices as part of mindfulness-based interventions, or was it mindfulness inclusive interventions, have shown to increase empathic concern, identification with all of humanity, and ethical decision-making. It decreased the distinction between us versus them, thus decreasing cultural bias. What is so important about this finding is that we know now that we can't emphasize with something that we do not identify with. If we don't identify with it, we dehumanize it. An example can be seen during the Holocaust. Because the Nazis didn't identify with the Jews, they dehumanized them, and thus the centers in the brain involved in empathy shuts down. So by increasing our ability to identify with other people, decreasing this us versus them differentiation, we become able to empathize with more people, referring to the ability to understand what another person is feeling and thinking and going through. And when we can feel empathy, we can feel compassion, which, in addition to empathy, refers to a commitment to relieve the suffering of others. In studies of leaders, more compassionate leaders have shown to have stronger connections between people, better collaborations, more trust, stronger commitment to the organization, and lower turnover. In fact, research has shown that this enhanced sense of a small self not only leads to less worry on a day-to-day basis, it also increased the social dimensions of our personal identities and pro-social behavior, such as generosity, helpfulness, and ethical conduct. Consider this quote by Albert Einstein. "A human being experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole nature in its beauty. I love this. This is Einstein saying this. It's so beautiful. If you think about it, it really makes sense. Having too much of a self-focus narrows our lenses. It narrows our way of perceiving things, and in the end, our consciousness, making small things matter more. As my dear colleague Dan Siegel often refers to, our consciousness is like a glass of water. If you add 1 teaspoon of salt in it, it will taste awful, and you will most likely not be able to drink it. However, if you expand your container, that same teaspoon of salt will now make it taste fresh. Same salt, same water, simply a different radio, and our experience is changed. Our consciousness is like that. You also don't want to have too much of a self-focus because the ego is extremely biased. This is something psychologists and many of you probably already know. It's called self-confirming bias. And it refers to the tendency that the ego tends to seek information that confirm our previous beliefs. Just consider for a moment how huge a hinder this is on growth and development and creativity. So, we now know that compassion can be actively cultivated. But what is even more important is that compassion is already part of who we are. It's in our DNA. It's actually supported by genetically based physiological systems. So it's more about tuning into what's already inside of us. Darwin even supported this. Darwin actually wasn't the one to say survival of the fittest. That was a person after him. Darwin said survival of the kindest. That sympathy and compassion is some of our strongest human capacities, and that communities with more compassionate and sympathetic members would thrive more. It's also seen widely in the animal kingdom, for example amongst orangutans and chimpanzees. If they lose an infant, they grieve, as can be seen in this picture here. It lost an infant, but it continued carrying it around although it was dead. And what I think is particularly interesting is that not only do they show grief, but their friends in their tribe show compassion and sympathy towards them when this happens. So they will walk over to it, and they will groom each other, and they will let them take care of their babies sometimes. And then what's really interesting, and my professor at UC Berkeley, Dagger Keltner, told me all of this. He said that they will say the same vocal tone as we will, humans, when expressing compassion and sympathy to another human being. And in vocal tones, I mean like, surprise would be, ah. So they express the same vocal tone when going over to the other monkey who've lost their infant. Let's test this out for a moment. So on the count of 3, I want you all to say the vocal tone that you would say when expressing compassion and sympathy to another being. Research has suggested that this is universal sound, and they've even tested it on tribes in the Amazon. But let's test it out. On the count of 3, express the vocal tone that you would say when expressing compassion and concern to another being. 1, 2, 3. Right? Isn't it beautiful? You were great at it. It's always like this. It's so beautiful. Compassion, true compassion, not only for other people, but for the world, was the focus of the intervention at Google we taught the leaders in this mindfulness-based leadership program for sustainability. We met for 4 weeks in total, once a week for about 3 to 4 hours, and each day consisted of different focuses with a variety of exercises and lecturing, and then we had a different focus on each day. So the first day of focus was on mindfulness. The second day of focus was on interdependence, talking about a lot of the same things that I've been sharing with you today, about expanding our self-focus and understanding that we're truly all interconnected. On day 3 was on higher purpose, how to find a deeper meaning with your work, with help mechanisms such as being authentic with yourself and with others, and being aligned with your own core beliefs and goals and values. Having self-efficacy is important as well. The belief that you have the power and ability to make an intended effect. Transcendence, in the form that your work provides you with opportunities so that you can see that what you're doing actually do have an effect on society and maybe even on the world. And purpose is very, very important. Having a deep purpose and meaning with why you are doing what you're doing. And then our last day of focus was on conscious leadership. As Raj Sisodan says, conscious leaders focus on we rather than me. They inspire, foster transformation, and bring out the best in those around them. So I've been allowed to share some of the results with you all here today only. And we asked the leaders different questions at the end of the intervention and a later follow-up. One of the questions was, over the past few days a week, what new aspects of yourself have you noticed? What new meaningful directions are occurring to you now? And some reported, clearer values to guide my life. Renewed hope, change can happen in small steps. I should follow my heart. Stronger grasp of identity. In each session, you were invited to be aware of your motivation. Did you notice any changes in your motivation? And a person said, I moved from being self-centered to other-centered. I'm more sure of what I want and what I need to get there. Strengthening of my motivation to have strong, fulfilling relationships, as interdependence is an integral part of humankind. And then people could talk about anything that had stood out to them in the program. And a person said, and this was shared yesterday as well, right? Warmth, compassion, love, kindness, etc. It spreads throughout a room like ripples in water. And this was really interesting, and I would love to have done the exercise with you, but I don't have time. Come up to me and I'll teach it to you. But we did an exercise, and the person said, looking at people in the eyes made me realize that there's real human beings behind eyes, with feelings, emotions, ambitions, etc. And it highlighted the importance of sustainable leadership. We would think that, of course we know that there is always living human beings behind eyes, but apparently we tend to forget. And then in the end, people could comment anything they felt stood out to them in the program. And a person said, this is important to society as a whole, to be conscious, be awake. Deploying programs like these can have a viral effect, net-to-net positive effect on any organization. Positivity and true human expression will have great impact on businesses, government, and society. Today, Google have incorporated mindfulness as being part of their organization. They have meditation rooms available for their employees that they can use at any time. They offer regular meditation, mindfulness, and yoga classes for their employees to do during a normal workday as well. And then when you get hired to Google, you have to go through a mandatory training. And as part of this training, there is a 2-day mindfulness and meditation course. And Google is not alone. Today, many of the big tech companies have incorporated mindfulness and compassion into their organization, or are doing active efforts towards doing it, such as Pinterest, Salesforce, and Apple. And this is also what I do at my Q&A work at Mobius, where we work with the CEOs and leaders and their teams of some of the greatest tech companies, and then we bridge them with the world's leading experts on well-being, such as Richard Davidson and Dan Siegel and Jack Kornfield. condemnation, amazing people. And we hope that by bridging those people together, hopefully they can create technology that not only target our most primitive parts of our brain and hijack our attention, as is unfortunately primarily the case today in many social media platforms, but that they instead can create technology that bring out the best in humanity. So, there's only one way of gaining the effects of mindfulness and compassion, and that's through practice. So, I'd like to guide you through a small exercise, a small meditation that we also did at Google. So, find a comfortable seating position. And feel free to move and adjust in any way you feel comfortable. And start by just noticing your breath. And take a deep inhale. And a long, deep, calm exhalation. Now shift your attention to your heart. Feel how it's pumping nutrition and oxygen throughout your body. How it knows exactly how to take care of you. And then now, I want to invite you to think of a person you hold dear. It might be a friend, a loved one, a family member, a pet. Someone that, when you think of them, your heart immediately opens. You might even notice a small smile on your face thinking about this person or this being. And then sending this person wishes of loving kindness by repeating the phrases that I'll say inside yourself. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be filled with loving kindness. I wish this for you. And now, shifting your attention to the person sitting to your right. And thinking that this person, just like you, wish to be happy and healthy. And that they have, just like you, experienced suffering and struggles. And send this person wishes of loving kindness. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be filled with loving kindness. Now shifting your attention to involve all people in this room, sitting here right now. sending all of the people who've come to this conference, to our mindfulness conference, sending them wishes of loving kindness. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with a joyful, playful, and grateful heart. Now expanding your attention to involve all people in your country. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be filled with loving kindness. Now expanding your attention even further to involve all beings on this earth, knowing that science have now confirmed what has been known for many, many, many years, that sending out wishes of kindness with intentions of care and compassion not only bring a positive change outward, but to our inner lives as well. So sending wishes of loving kindness to all beings on this earth. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you live with joyful, grateful, and playful heart. I wish this for you. Now notice that the person sitting to your left just sent you wishes of loving kindness a moment ago. Just notice how this feels, receiving those wishes. Now, offering those wishes to yourself. You may want to try to put a hand on your heart. We now know that this releases oxytocin in your body, the love hormone, so to say. And offering those same wishes to yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. filled with loving kindness. And inhale, receiving. And an exhale, offering it. As we come to an end in the practice, I want you to just reflect for this moment and reflect on your experience and on one key takeaway you want to take away from either this practice or from what I've been sharing with you so far. And sit with it for about 3 breaths. We now know that you need to sit with an experience for at least 20 to 30 seconds before it can be incorporated into your long-term memory. As you get ready, you can slowly open your eyes. Now I want you to reflect on this question. If you were supposed to be more compassionate towards others, work or non-work life, which practical steps would you take over the next week? So I want you to reflect on this for a moment, and when you feel ready, turn to the person sitting next to you and share some of your ideas. Would anyone mind to share which ideas you came up with?
We spoke about taking more space and the importance of taking space. And we also spoke about the seduction technology and resisting that.
Yeah, exactly. Taking more space in terms of...
Just space for oneself, space to pause.
Yeah, beautiful. Taking the space to pause. Thank you.
We were talking about something that was mentioned yesterday, about really getting to know the person who's behind the colleague mask.
Yeah.
You know, really, because who they are in person, it affects how they are as colleagues. So to actually, we made a deal that by next week we'll get to know at least one colleague, what's happening in your life, what's behind the facade, just to show that they're being seen.
Yay, thank you. Beautiful.
talked about contacting people you care about and having a good conversation with them and telling them you love them and that will matter to you. And also all the little meetings during the day, like when you go on the bus, just smile to the bus driver, and like all these little interactions create something positive there.
Yeah.
And also to be aware of the habitual judging and not buy into that when the judging thoughts come and not let them kind of spread into the world.
Yeah, beautiful, thank you. It's actually really interesting because a big and very interesting research study found that our daily interactions, not with those actually from our family or friends, but in our community, was one of the strongest predictors of a person's happiness. Yeah, so just like in the bus driver as well, right? The postman, if we still have those. It's very important. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a commitment to say thanks to everybody here, and particularly the organisation behind this, for allowing me to be here, that I'm going to write something about what's happened during these 2 days. So if anybody here wants to say anything and have that included, then please just come to me and I'll take a few quotes and I'll write something about this to spread the good news that we're here doing what we're doing and give that maximum impact. And so I just want to make a commitment to you all to do that. So please keep me focused on that.
Amazing, thank you. And a final one?
We talked about that we wanted to practice more loving kindness meditations in the morning.
Yeah.
To be more compassionate towards others.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, and this exercise took 10 minutes, right? We don't have 10 minutes. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and for being here. So I hope that you will all commit to one thing that you will do in your organization or in your personal life to make it more compassionate. And then I'll leave you with a quote by Anne Frank. How wonderful that nobody need wait a single minute before starting to change the world. Thank you.